got my notes here. We're going to be doing a little bit of testing. First step is that we're going to be draining the tank. As you can hear, we've got the tank draining right now. And when we're going to go inside the cabin, we're going to listen for the low pressure alarm in our air brake system, or in our air system, I should say. We're going to watch the air pressure build up. We're going to listen for the governor cut in, cut out. We're going to make sure that our pressure is holding for a couple of minutes. We're going to be doing a lot of testing in this video, so let's get into it. Okay, so real quick, we'll talk about some safety in the shop. We should be wearing our safety glasses. We should be wearing some steel toe work boots, something like that. We're going to be doing this test on a level surface because we're going to be releasing the parking brake, and we're going to be at a point where we're not pressing the brakes at all. Okay, so another important thing, we're going to use our chocks, right? Put our chocks in place. We're going to make sure that this truck doesn't roll around anywhere while we're doing our testing. So let's get up in the cabin and put in some work. Okay, so here we are on our truck. Here's our primary tank. Little purge. Here we go. Right? So we're going to have to start, like I said, with our tanks at 0. So you hear that little hissy? Oh, she's almost done. Okay. And then over here, this is our secondary. Empty tanks. That's the perfect starting point. Okay, so here we are inside the cab. As you can see, we have our low pressure indicators, the lights on. Our tanks are at 0. It just turned off because I don't have the key. In and on. Here we go. So we're going to start this up. Turn that AC off. Let it go through its light test real quick. That's our alarm, our low air pressure alarm, telling us, hey, don't move me yet. You're not ready to roll. So we're going to push our clutch in real quick. Start it up. Make sure we're neutral. There we go. Okay. So now we've got our brake pressure about to start picking up. See that? It's starting to build. Now we're supposed to be at a fast idle, so we're going to kick our RPMs up to about 1200. Okay? And that's just to help the air pressure build up. So I'm going to go ahead and pause until we are close to the indicator. One thing that I did not talk about is that this alarm is going to be going off until about 60 to 75 psi. We are sitting at about 50-ish, so our alarm will be going off here soon. But what we want is we're going to wait until the governor itself cuts out, and it's not going to be cutting out until about 120 psi. So we're just going to keep on waiting for this. Oh, actually, we're at about 60, 65 now, so we'll just ride this out and wait for this alarm to go off. And there we go. Our alarm is off. It hit right around the 75-ish psi. Both of our tanks are building up pressure just fine. We're going to time this right here. Listening for is for that governor to cut out and for our air driver to purge out that last little bit. There it goes. Okay, so we just hit up our operating pressure. The air dryer just purged out. The governor just cut out. What we're going to do now is shut it down and watch our tank level for 2 minutes to make sure that we don't have any leak going on. And now we sit for the 2 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and cut out for the simplicity of this video. Okay, and now 2 minutes have elapsed. We have seen 0 drop in our pressure. That tells us that the system itself is holding a seal. Are going to go ahead and do a brake application, and we're going to wait for that governor to kick back in and build up the pressure. And we're going to make sure that we don't have any kind of leaking while we are applying the brakes. Alright guys, so what we're testing now is the governor cut-in. We're going to reduce the pressure about 30 psi, and that governor should be kicking back up on its own. So we're just reducing our pressure here a little bit so we can make sure that it starts building its air back up. And as you can see, our governor has kicked in, and we are putting our building pressure back up in our tanks. We're going to get back up to maximum pressure, and then we're going to be going ahead and checking for leakage at our reservoir air supply. Okay, so we've got to build these tanks all the way back up, and then we're going to go out to the tanks and check them out for leaks. Okay guys, so we have watched our PSI on the gauges for the 2 minutes at the full pressure. What we're doing now is we're going to walk around our tanks and look at all the fittings, feel them, make sure that there is no leakage around, right? So we're going to be going around to our little brake chambers, our bellows here. Sometimes they'll leak up under here or up over here on the top. They'll be dry rotted, you can't even see them. You have to listen. And we just continue to walk around. We're going to inspect, like I said, these bellows here, the chambers, anything that's got the hose lines, the air lines going to them. Check everything. And this is our air leak test. Okay, right? So we got our this truck's actually in really good shape. I don't hear any leaks. I don't hear anything going on. Another good helper in this test is going to be a spray bottle with some soapy solution in it. You'll see bubbles. Another thing that'll help you see is if it's got a clear spot, like almost like it's a clean spot on the hose line, or on the air hose. If the entire hose is dirty, but it's got a clean spot, there's a good chance there's a leak there. You should probably inspect that. So we've walked around the backside. We haven't heard any leaks, so we're going to go ahead and progress on to the next test. Our next test is going to be, we're going to be looking for leakage in the service air delivery. Okay, we're supposed to be at full pressure with the engine stop and the parking brakes released. Basically, we're going to hold a brake application. We're going to watch the air pressure stabilize for the minute, and then after that one initial minute, we're going to start timing 2 minutes and watching for the gauges for a pressure drop. Okay, so now same thing as the initial test, our pressure drop, we're allowed 4 psi and 2 additional psi per trailer that we've got attached. We don't have any trailer attached to this tractor, so we're going to be aiming for only a 4 psi drop. Okay, so for simplicity purposes, we are going to go ahead and apply that brake, and then we are going to wait our minute. I will come back to this. Okay, so we've got our brake application. We're going to wait a minute for this to stabilize. I'm going to go ahead and pause and let you know when a minute has elapsed, and we will go ahead and do our 2-minute leak test. Okay, so the minute has elapsed, and now we're going to start our 2-minute test. Again, we're going to be looking for leakage in the service air delivery. Okay, so we got our brakes pushed in, and we're going to watch this for 2 minutes and looking for any brake pressure drop. So again, I'm going to pause, and we will come back to this after the 2 minutes have elapsed. So 2 minutes has elapsed. We've seen maybe a 2 psi drop. So that's actually really, really good. The next part of this test is actually to check the brake chamber push rod travel. However, this truck is equipped with disc brakes all the way around, and we don't have a push rod travel to really measure on the brake chambers. But basically, if you're going to be testing that, you have to look up, you have to see what size brake chamber you have on the vehicle, and you have to check what the CVSA max allowable stroke is, okay? And that ranges anywhere from like 1 3/8 of an inch all the way up to like 2 1/4. Okay, so for that test, you have to refer to your own manufacturer's specifications. And what we're doing right now is our dual system integrity check. What we're doing right now is draining the primary tank. As you can see, that needle's dropping down. We're going to get it all the way down to 0. The secondary tank is still holding its pressure. That's pretty cool. That's a good job. After we get this tank drained down to 0, what we're going to do is make a brake application with our parking brakes released, and basically only the rear brake should apply. The primary tanks for the front, secondary for the rear. We'll go ahead and drain this, and we're going to make sure that the other ones are still applying, operating as usual. And then we're going to go ahead and do the same exact test, but with the secondary tank, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and pause this, and we're going to conduct our test from the outside of the truck. We have an assistant in the cab right now, and basically we're going to be listening to make sure that these rear brakes are going to be applying while our primary tank is drained. We're basically using the secondary tank now to go ahead and apply the brakes. And this is just in case you end up losing pressure to one of your tanks. Right now we're testing the primary, like I said. After this, we're going to go ahead and reverse the test, and we're going to do it on the secondary tank. Okay, we're trying to run the wall now. All right, so that's our brake application. Sounds like it's still working to apply our brakes back here. That's the secondary tank activating these calipers. And now we're going to go ahead and drain the secondary tank, and we're going to make sure that the front brakes still apply. So we have drained our secondary tank to 0. Our primary tank has its air pressure in it. It didn't leak hardly any at all. Again, this test is really to make sure that that the integrity, or the valve in there, is only operating as it should, which is a one-way valve for air to go in, not to be escaping out of there. Okay, so we hit the purge valve on it, and we drained the secondary tank. And if that valve was bad, you would see the primary tank there dropping in pressure, and the secondary tank starting to come up in pressure. You know, that's leaking air between the two tanks. Okay, but we've got this already at 0. That's holding up. We're going to get our helper to jump in the cab. He's going to go ahead and apply the brakes, and we are going to go listen to the front brakes and make sure that they're applying. The primary, or the front brakes are usually from the secondary tank. Right now it's at 0, so in theory it wouldn't work, but because we got this protection valve, we're going to go ahead and use the air from our primary tank to make our brake application. All right, so here we are outside the cab. We are by our brakes. Boom. He's hitting the pads. We can hear the caliper moving. We hear him going ahead and making a few different brake applications. It's working well. It is, I would say that this valve is in good service, and everything's working as it should properly. Okay guys, our next test is actually the manual parking brake operation. Okay, and now for this test, we're going to want our air pressure, or our air tanks, at full pressure, and we're going to want the engine idling from about 600 to 900 RPMs or so. But basically, we're going to be going ahead and using our parking brake, which is usually this yellow diamond here. We're going to be listening to make sure that it applies and releases promptly. Make sure that those lines are at full pressure and are operating properly. Okay, so this test is pretty basic. All you got to do is pull to apply, boom, and push to release, boom. That test is sat. We're going to move on to the next part. The test that we're going to be doing now is called a chuff test. And basically this is the test for the pressure modulator valve and the traction control valve. Basically we need to have our tanks at full pressure, which we got them at about 120 psi right now. The engine is going to be stopped and the parking brakes are released. So we have our brakes released, we have our engine off, and basically what's going to be happening is we're going to make and hold the brake application, right? So we're going to step on our pedal, and when the ignition power is applied, the modulator solenoids is briefly energized. Okay, so that means that they're going to cut on for a little bit, and they're going to make a little almost like a puff noise, right? That's what the chuff is. And the order of this is going to be the right front, and then the left front, the right rear, and then the left rear. Okay, and again, we have our wheel chocks in, we are on level ground, everything is ready to go for this test. That was that shot from right by the frame rail over on the passenger front side. You could hear all the chuffs, all the modules or modulator valves are working properly, the traction control valves are working properly. This test is sat. We're moving on to the next part of the test, testing our air. So that concludes our testing on the air system on this vehicle here. It's a Transtar International. Basically we tested for the governor kicking in, kicking out. We tested the integrity between the two tanks, making sure they weren't leaking to each other. We made sure that the parking brake was applying as it should, promptly and efficiently. We did the chuff test to make sure that our pressure modulator valves and traction control valves were in good operation. We did significant testing today. We didn't really find any leaks. We handled business as we should. And this truck is in service and ready to go, back on the road. Go do some things. Thanks for watching, guys.